Hello, hello. My name is April Malone with Yes, I Work From Home, and this is the podcast. Today I have Elissa Unton from Los Angeles, California with us. She is the CEO and founder of Arvida. Uh, Elissa, why don't you come in and tell us what that is and what you do and your background a little bit?
Absolutely. And just in the spirit of the podcast, I am joining from my living room. So, good morning, LA time here. I'm a serial entrepreneur and a founder and CEO at Arvida. Arvida is a modern career guidance company with an online software platform. And we provide US professionals with the structure, expert guidance, and community to find and land fulfilling work faster. And P.S., we stay with you until you land. So, my background, I earned my bachelor's degree from Cal State Fullerton California State University at Fullerton, not just Cal State Fullerton. And I started my career in investor relations, working full-time at an agency. And then after I graduated, I worked in communications and investor relations for a small B2B e-commerce day back in the go-go days of the late 90s. And then later, I worked at a larger investor relations agency before I transitioned to strategy consulting for 5 years, actually, at Booz Allen Hamilton. And there I was inspired to start my first company, which was a solo venture I called Scrumptious Lunches, because while I was working at Booz Allen, the lunch options were dire. And although gourmet on-site point of sale food was a need, and I set up the whole business and piloted it, the low margin model was just not scalable. Food is a very low margin business. And then Twitter and food trucks came along 2 years later. So I had identified the need and a solution, but Twitter and food trucks really solved that, which was just sort of like so much learning, right? And then later I
How
worked.
did Twitter and food trucks solve that? Can you expound on that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have food trucks in your area? I know not every area does.
Yeah, but I mean, I
Yes.
guess some of them park outside of businesses, but keep going.
Yeah. So if you're working in an office building, particularly big office buildings, um, and you're hungry, like it's unless you're close to food, it's just kind of hard to get there. So what Twitter did is Twitter gave the food trucks a way to broadcast their schedules, like, oh, we're going to be here on Tuesday and here on Thursday and here, da da da. So then they could move around to follow the demand. Most people don't want to eat the same thing every day.
That's true.
And then food trucks could move to like get the demand, and the audience could just check real quick to see where the food truck was. And so
Mm.
there became this whole, the demand supply thing really evened out. And the other thing about food trucks is that, um, you know, construction sites always had food trucks that would pull up and serve them, at least in California. But the higher end, if you think about the gourmet lunch, whatever, that wasn't really a thing. But food trucks can do something really important in food, which is with respect to margins, which is they can make exactly enough. So they're not wasting the food. That if you're in our model, we had to have the chefs make the food and then go out and try to sell it. And so we ended up donating a fair amount, which is not a bad thing, but the
That low
margins,
margin, yeah.
the margins all went to the homeless shelters. So yeah, it's a low margin business.
Okay, that makes sense. So, at what point did you fizzle or did you move to a food
Uh,
truck?
no. So I actually never stopped working full time. So I tried that. The margins were too low, didn't work. So I shut it down pretty quickly. And I went back and got my MBA at night. I switched from strategy consulting to I actually worked in construction fleet and enterprise valuation for 5 years while I got my MBA at night. And then I graduated deep into like the huge recession, right? There was
Yep.
no demand for
I
MBAs in
also
finance.
graduated in 2008. So,
You remember that year, yeah. So I just stayed where I was working in valuation, and then later I managed and led financial planning and analysis teams at bigger companies, so Thomson Reuters and Cetera and Healthcare Partners, which is now part of Optum. And so then while I was working full time, I co-founded a project called the Skid Row Spa. So many people have heard in downtown Los Angeles, there's a lot of people experiencing homelessness. And sadly now all across the city. But this was a volunteer project that resulted in the Refresh Spot, which is a publicly funded 24-hour hygiene center for people living outside in downtown LA. And it's serving about 700 or 800 people a day now. And that was a volunteer advocacy project, and I'm not involved with it. It's actually operated by Homeless Healthcare, which is awesome because cleanliness is dignity, as you can
Were
imagine.
those like trailer trucks that would come in with the showers, or was it a stationary building?
This is actually a permanent location. So when we worked with an architect to design it, and what we saw, and I think you can hear I have a lot of finance background, but what we saw is actually building a permanent building is more cost effective than trailers,
Really?
which is counterintuitive. But optically, voters hate a permanent location because people want to believe that this is just going to be temporary while people gain homelessness, while, by the way, many people don't want any new housing in their neighborhood. But anyway, I digress.
Of course. Yes.
So we did work with the city and found a vendor, the city of Los Angeles, who funds this. We found vendors for temporary trailers that are I digress. But the format is a stationary location. It has good security. It has showers, laundry, toilets, case management. You can charge your phone. There's music. There's places to sit. It's a nice place, and the facility itself is in temporary structures. Although last year they expanded it, I think doubled the size with more temporary trailers.
You have mentioned a lot of things that I'm very unfamiliar with. Your background is just very different from mine. So I have a few questions. Can you talk a little bit about what does someone who's in investor relations do?
Yeah, absolutely. So have you heard of public relations?
Yes, but go ahead and describe it
It's
as
just
though they
that.
didn't know.
Okay, so public relations is basically the communication side of a business, or sometimes people hire an agency to share with the audiences. So it used to be very much focused on just journalists, so media, newspapers and TV and that sort of thing. Now, communications, of course, is so broad because it includes podcast hosts. I bet you get pitched actually by PR people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice.
So, investor relations is a public relations function that sits in the office of a chief financial officer for publicly traded companies. So, if your company is listed on NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange, you have a lot of investors, and you have big institutional investors, and you have small investors, and you have analysts maybe that follow the industry or your company. So there's a lot of important audiences. And as you can imagine, the Securities and Exchange Commission has a lot of rules around what you can say and when you can say it, what you can't say and who you can say it to. And so it's a very regulated communications function that's designed to communicate what's happening from a business or financial standpoint to your key stakeholders.
I'm assuming there's a lot of legal jargon in there. Do you work closely with lawyers?
Yeah, definitely. So it's an interest. I loved the working in that function. Was one of the places I started my career there, and you really have to understand the financials. So it's pretty analytic, and it's also pretty strategic because the story is, hey, our business is great, or oh, we had a crisis but we're recovering, or we're growing, or something. Investors really want to understand what they're owning, or are they going to buy or sell, right?
What's the risk? Yeah.
And so that has very real ramifications for a company's ability to maintain their operations. If they cannot fund their business with equity, they're in trouble or we're out of business. So it's not that PR, public relations, isn't important. That's the input side, right? Sales. But the investor relations is really about holding up the company's story to the owners or potential owners. So yeah, lots of skills I still use. It's not it's not a great place for a career actually, because there's not that many. If you think about how many public companies are going to hire full-time investor relations people, it's just not, versus like being a finance person or being a teacher, like,
Right.
where there's just so much more opportunity.
And then you were talking about doing an MBA at night while working. Were you full time?
Yeah.
And were you raising a family at any point here?
No. So I have one daughter, and I had her after I graduated.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I wasn't able to land my new job, so I was still in the job that I'd been in while I was doing my MBA in valuation, and that's when I had my daughter. So I still
Okay.
worked. I took time off from maternity leave, which I was grateful for, but then I was still working, but only, 40, 50 hours a week.
And what is the valuation job? Can you describe that for a few
Mhm.
minutes?
I don't know if you own a home, but lots of people do. And often when you buy a home, there's an appraisal of how much that home is worth.
Yep.
That's just valuation. Valuation 101 is how much is someone willing to pay for this? And they look at factors like what are the comparables? So if you're thinking about it from a home standpoint, it's the other homes in your neighborhood. So valuation is really important for in this case, it was low companies that have big construction fleets finance those fleets. So vehicles, right? If you've ever got a car loan, that's financing for your one car, but you're financing
Right.
the whole fleet. So that is backed by those fleets are backed by debt. So asset-backed loans, right? You're just the way if you have a car that's financed, that's an asset-backed loan, or your mortgage is an asset-backed loan. So
Okay.
in order for the banks to feel like they have a solid case to lend the money, they need to understand the value of the fleet. And as you can imagine, the value changes over time and
Yep.
market demand and all that.
Yeah. Depreciation and
Yeah, you got it.
all right. So let's see. And then now, why don't you talk about Arvida for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was building these big finance teams, I was working in-house, big corporations, building bigger and bigger finance teams. I was also mentoring college undergraduates at my alma mater. I've gotten a lot of help in my life, and I always try to find ways to volunteer and give back. And so I would have these people for three to five students for the whole year. And like I was supportive or would like look at their resume or mock interviews, but like it didn't really help. Like it wasn't really a solution because the career fairs and applying cold and like it doesn't work. That's not how people land fulfilling jobs. And so I was also recruiting and hiring for my own growing teams. And that side is super broken, like job descriptions and getting positions filled. And like it takes so long to get the right person in the right chair. So
Were you
when I
doing the HR yourself, or did
no,
you
I
have?
wasn't even HR. I was a finance person, but
Mhm.
very typically in internal recruiting, an internal recruiter would be recruiting for many different kinds of work. So they don't really understand your work very well.
Yeah.
And they don't understand the business that well. They understand recruiting. And the structure is such that they're not adding that much value. So they get overloaded with work. So often the first thing an internal recruiter would say to me is, well, I have 60 requisitions I'm hiring for. So they can't really spend enough time on any one requisition because then the other things, it's hard. The process is pretty broken on the inside too. And there's a lot of people trying to change it. But what has happened, have you heard of external recruiters?
Like headhunters?
Yeah. So what happens is because the internal recruiting function doesn't work very well, companies, and I did this too, end up paying a large salary, like 25 or 30% of the salary to an external recruiter to do that work, to
Who
find
probably
people.
knows even less about the company.
Actually, they actually tend to be very good because they
Okay.
specialize in they're making a lot of money. So
Okay.
external recruiters will place 1 to 3 candidates a month, right? So 12 a year, if you think about
Okay.
how few that is. And they work functionally. So let's say you and I talked, you've got this background in education. So maybe you're like, you know what? I'm going to look for learning and development training where I can also bring in my podcast skills because this is a big thing where I'm working. So I'm going to look for this and I'm going to find, um, you know, adult education is really where I want to be. So I'm going to find the recruiter who does that, right? So when you find that recruiter, they really understand what your skill sets are and what the need is, because that's all they do. So they're good at it, but it's very expensive and
They're
slow.
not trying to juggle so many positions like you were doing, as you were trying to be internal and
Yeah, I
recruiting at the
wasn't
same
even
time.
recruiting. So
Mhm.
I was running the finance team. So my
Yeah.
job was budgeting, forecasting, analysis. I had 7 people on my team and I collaborated with lots of the leaders. Like my job wasn't recruiting, but if I didn't hire people, I was going to die. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't be a mother and exercise and sleep without people doing the work, you know? So when I left that company, I had an opportunity to become an entrepreneur. I looked around at sort of what I thought were big problems. And I'd also done a lot of work around my credo, like why am I here? Like, what's my purpose? And part of my purpose at work is helping other people develop their careers. As I mentioned, I've had a lot of help. So when I thought about that, I thought like, oh, maybe there's something here that I could really scale this, not help like informally, but really scale. And also like this problem of the job market being so broken, like this is a massive problem. Like it's a problem for everyone in every country, in every field. Like it's just broken. So another part of my credo at work is solving big problems. And then I started Arvida with a friend of mine who's a brilliant career coach. And I had watched her for 5 years. She did this thing that she called a solo entrepreneurial business she called career happiness coaching, mostly for people in their 40s and 50s. And so we took
one-on-one.
Yeah, so that's really hard to scale. She had a little bit of group, but not very much. And she didn't have any of the community. I can't remember if she had only a little bit of community, but she didn't have any of the external recruiter or external mentors or the software. We have this whole software application. So she wouldn't have been able to scale with what she did. Solo coaches is you're selling your time basically, right? So it's hard to scale. But yeah, so she and I teamed up, and then we launched our first program for recent college graduates in 2018, our second program for mid-career, so people like you, 6 to 15 years of work experience, about half of whom have a master's degree. Many, majority probably are parents or caregivers. We launched in 2019, and then in 2020, we launched Energize, which is our service for people with 20 or 15, more than 15 years of work experience. It looks like the sweet spot there is probably 20 to 25.
I actually have over 20 years, but
oh, I'm sorry. You look so young.
Oh, thank you. I'm 43. A lot of that though was, without much movement. I was raising my family while, carrying the burden of the health benefits and all of that. But I was also like, with young children. And so I was working more or less full time. It was considered full time, but it was like 0.78, I think, at the time. Um, and so I didn't move. Like I wasn't trying to like move up the ladder during those years. And I find that now when I'm looking at positions, people just assume that if you have over 10 or 15 years of work experience that you have like ranked and ranked and ranked. And that's where I kind of feel like a fish out of water, maybe. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have a couple things there. My first encouragement to you is, aren't working parents amazing? Like, look, you held it all together. Everybody had health insurance. Not it's hard, right? By the way, I love hiring working parents because they get things done. Like if somebody is not in the ER bleeding or dead, it gets done. But so, pat yourself on the back for managing that juggle. It's hard and you're doing it. You did it. In terms of how you communicate your experience, one tip is that you just don't need it all on your resume. Like really, if you think about it, even if you were to hire, let's say you were to hire a podcast editor or something, you're not really that interested in what happened even 10 years ago, right? What have you been doing the last couple of years? If someone said to you like, oh, well, 10 years ago, I edited a podcast, you'd be like, okay, like, what are your skills now? So a lot of us, people with a lot of experience think like, oh, I have to put everything on my resume. No, a resume is a marketing document that's really about, hey, this is how I add value, what my skills are. And recency or recent work. Is recency even a word? I feel like no.
It felt fine to me, but go for it.
Now I have to somebody's going to Wikipedia this and tell me, right? But yeah, recent work and skills are actually more important. I have, and we can include this in the show notes, but I'll definitely send it to you as well. We have a lot of content on our blog targeted at people in career transition. And one of the things is how to update your resume. And
Mhm.
something else that might be good for you to look at is using volunteering to level up in your career. And you might be able to look at, in this case, your podcasting is kind of more of a side hustle, but that's sort of like in between where you're not a paid employee.
Right. Right. I think that your mentoring work that you were doing as a volunteer, I mean, I guess I should just ask, did you feel like that really helped influence your decision to start Arvida?
Um, yeah, very much. Both my work that I was doing as a leader in these corporations, really understanding how much team matters, like how important the people you work with are, like the right skills, experience, education, and knowledge in the right chair. And if everybody in your team is like that, it's great. And if not, or even if one person is wrong, it's not great.
Mm.
So, really understanding how important that fit is. And then also just seeing the frustration that other people, both in that formal program, the college undergraduates, but also, people would just come talk to me about what they were trying to do in their lives and their careers and how it just wasn't great solutions. Like, so, if you think about what, and this is very like US professional centric. So I'm going to
Yeah.
own that as a lens. But if you think about what professionals invest in, often fitness, right? So join a gym or maybe you golf or yoga or something like that, but you pay for that. Your wardrobe. I mean, working at home, we don't have to do as much, but you still need like something, right? Hair, maybe. Hair, especially for women. Like, can we talk about how much people spend on their hair every month? Like, it's not free. So, so I mean, and if it is, like, I applaud you for that. I'm still owning living in LA. Like, I have to tell you the culture, whatever. But there's a lot of money that people are investing in physical image, mental health, even if you go to have any kind of therapy or group support, um, nutrition, whatever, right? So the fitness industry, and this is, I think, 2020 figures, is $35 billion a year with a B in the
Mm-hmm.
US. And career stuff, like all in, right? Individual career coaching and probably like resume classes, which, spoiler, a good resume will not land you a good job. That's not how it works. Um, but all of that is like, I think 15 billion, like
Okay.
half.
Wow.
So yeah, and so what I saw is like people are really frustrated and it really matters. Like a great job changes your life, right? A great job is opportunity for income. It's you're feeding your family, right? You can send your kids to classes. Maybe you can hire a caregiver for your elderly grandmother or your mom. Opportunity means you can have a more fulfilling career for longer. That means you can afford to live where you want to live. It means retirement. Like, it's not a side note, right? It's not like, oh, I can wear my favorite jeans again. Like fitness might be sometimes if you think about short term, right?
Yeah.
So with the right investment, you really change your life. And so that, to me, that was just really inspiring. And also, as I said, I'm not the career coach. My co-founder
Mm-hmm.
is doing this work with people. And I was watching, I knew her for 5 years and the results are great. And I was sitting there watching that and I was like, wait a minute, like, there's a solution for this nonsense. Like, this is great.
I feel like I kind of side railed us a little earlier when I was talking about myself. But you were talking about the different categories of people that you reach, like the people with, recent graduating, who are recent graduates, sorry, and then those with 15 and then more.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to keep going down that thread that I kind of interrupted?
Yeah, happy to. So the commonality for our clients, as I said, we're only in the US right now. We're excited to go global. I actually started to talk, I guess that's not really news, but oh well,
Yay.
shh. I
Go for
started
it.
talking to somebody in Singapore and somebody else in Egypt. So we'll see, TBD, not this year. Um, but people are ambitious. People want, like, even you, like, you're not done. Like, you've got a lot of excitement around what you're going to do in the world and how you're going to, not just earn money, how you're going to contribute and impact them, um, So people have energy, they're ambitious. People who are not done. So if you've worked with people, or even if you've had in your life, I think, I can't remember, maybe before we started recording, you've had periods where you're just kind of like, I'm on cruise control, baby. Like I'm doing the work, but I'm not ambitious right now, which is fine. Right? Every team has those people. Like that's totally fine. But you're not in a mode where you're going to ambitiously look for something. So you're ambitious, you're not done with your career, and you're willing to invest the time. And this is a big one because
Mm-hmm.
although you might think parents have this problem, it is not a parent problem. It is across the age range. Actively doing the work to really identify, who am I? What makes me happy? What are my top skills? What kind of life am I building? Where is the opportunity? This takes time. So it
Yeah.
takes 5 to 10 hours a week for our clients in 10, 12, or 16 weeks. Like that's an investment of time, right? So if you're actively looking, have time that you're willing to devote, not everybody does. And it is, it is an investment. You can see our pricing on our website. It's,
Okay.
we keep it less than a week of salary. A lot of people, it's less than half a week of salary. And I do
Okay.
ask, because of course I'm a finance person, how
Right.
much, what are you trying to make here? But yeah, so that's the thing, is you're willing to invest the time, you can afford the money. You should never, ever pay for coaching or career guidance when you need to pay your rent. You need to know, we say our rule of thumb is you need to have runway for at least 2 months, you know how to pay your bills. And the second you drop below that 2 months, you need to shift your focus to earning, short-term income. So
Mm-hmm.
babysitting, dog walking, consulting as a backfill for a CFO, like whatever you do that,
Yeah. Just
So
like, is that where you see people like driving for Uber and those kinds of things just to get by
yeah, I
for that
mean,
short time?
where I see people, so one of the mistakes that job seekers make, especially if they're they've left their job. So if you haven't left your job yet, there's an article, and again, I'm saying all this stuff for show notes, but we can put it anywhere. There's an article we have on our blog called What to Consider Before You Leave Your Job.
Mm-hmm.
Go read that before you quit.
Mm-hmm.
But in a case like yours, where you're in transition, or if you're a recent college graduate, or maybe you've been a caregiver for a child or a parent, and now that finally, like, hello, vaccines.
Yes. Yes.
Hello, I'm so excited about
I
this.
know.
I just got my kid vaccinated, so now that finally COVID is lifting and you're like, okay, we can do this. um, it's really important for income and also mindset that you're going to work, that you're,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, drive Uber. Some of Shipped, I don't know if you've heard of that one, is an
Yeah.
interesting one. So that's one, if you don't want to deal with restaurants, if you're the kind of person who likes to go to Target, it's for
Mm-hmm.
you. But yeah, but we just say, and again, not to keep driving people back to our blog, but we have good stuff. There's an article we have about staying solvent while you job search, that we actually detail a lot of the ways that our clients have made money. Like, this is not like, oh, we Googled. Like, no, this is how our clients who are professionals on job street made money.
Mm-hmm.
So
Awesome.
yeah, so definitely 2 months, the heuristic, there's 2 months that you need the runway. And on the timing front, if you're going to invest up to 10 high quality hours a week, I always say high quality. This is not when you're tired, right? Your brain has to be on.
Or
Um,
trying to like watch Netflix in the background.
nope, nope, nope. You can listen to a podcast, I guess. Anyway, it's a joke, right? Because I don't want to like.
I don't, but I definitely have to focus on what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, if you're doing that, and you should sleep 8 hours a day and nurture yourself and take care of family, you have time to work. So, picking up short-term flexible work while you're in
Mm-hmm.
transition is a great, great option.
One of my go-tos right now is I'm actually actively applying for my different district. We just changed schools, and so I'm going to try to substitute teach for our local district. I've done it in the past for like almost 5 years. And it's the sort of thing where I wouldn't feel like I'm just like abandoning them if I were to like bow out once I get full-time employment again. But it's nice transition work, and they really need help right now, like really desperately.
I think every school district needs help. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you've got the heart for it, and
Yeah.
you can show up and do it. I think that's a great one. We had during the pandemic, one of our clients was leading a pod, if you heard about learning
Yep.
pods.
Oh, yeah.
So
We have friends that did it. Yep.
not as easy to bow out, like,
Mhm.
but yeah, lots of options right now. I have to tell you, like, um, I'm sorry, can I stand on, I'm going to stand on an opinion soapbox for a
Go for
second.
it.
I've been watching career markets for a while, right? Because I was mentoring college undergraduates for 5 years and then hiring, and then there, it was slow and whatever. I think the job market coming out, starting in 2022 is going to be amazing. like,
Good.
in terms of like what it's been like so far, it's been a little chaotic, I
Yeah.
think. And so rule of thumb is if, and this is for people, not for you, because you're still trying to figure out like, what am I going to do? But for people who know what they want to do, maybe you're already working, you just want a different job, start
Mhm.
talking to people in the right field. Don't apply cold. If you're getting an offer or exciting interviews within 4 weeks, you're good. You don't need help. If
Okay.
you're not, that's us. That's where you need help, because the time, jobs searching, especially as professionals, really has cycles. So if you
Mhm.
think about, I'm sure, teaching, if you think of that as an analogy, you want to get hired as a teacher, July is your month, right? Because that's when districts want. If you want to work seasonal work at Sur La Table, I love that stuff. And man, that discount would be great, right? Now's a good time, right?
Yeah.
So
Right before
season,
the winter holidays. Yeah.
yeah. But in terms of professional job seeking, if you're actively looking already and you're not getting exciting interviews, the next it's effectively like 4 or 5 weeks. I'm looking at my calendar. 4 or 5 weeks are a great time to spend on that self-awareness, reflection, like who am
Mhm.
I in the world stuff. But or if you're not ready, you're gonna just do the holidays with your family. January is going to be really good time for, and January is always a good time, but especially this year because businesses spent so much of the last, I guess, 2 years, like reacting, right? What are we going to do? COVID? What are we going to do with people working more? Everybody going home? Not everybody, by the way. 35% of the US professional workforce went home. That's
Wow.
not everybody. That's
Yeah.
probably, do you know the statistics for people working at home?
I don't. I just feel that it's really advanced quickly and that, I know that the work from home environment and like the acceptance of it has really progressed, but I don't know statistics.
Yeah, I don't either. It'd be fun to see them. But yeah, so I think a lot of people, well, anecdotally, many of our current clients and people I've spoken to are not, they want to work at home.
Yeah.
And their offices are saying, like, no, you got to come back. And they're like, no, I
No.
don't. And so
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, maybe 10% of people who are in that position are going to be on the move. By the way, all of their jobs are going to open up. So if you're someone who's willing to do hybrid,
Right.
that's available to
Yeah.
you. And then businesses are also, you can't really run a business in react mode. It's been
Mhm.
2 years. So I think with January, a lot of businesses have that fiscal year calendar and
Okay.
budget. And
Mhm.
I think with January, the market salaries, people are going to really realize that if we're going to really fill these open positions, we have to raise
Mhm.
salaries.
Mhm.
So I think that's going to be great for people who are job seeking. And I think positions that have been open a while or people have left and they've been like, oh, we're not sure what to do. And be like, no, we actually need these people. So I think businesses are going to hire faster. So I
Mhm.
think blah, blah. I think the first quarter is going to be a really amazing time to land a new job.
I hear so much conflicting information about job availability. People are saying that we're hiring, we can't find workers, and other people are saying we're applying, we're applying, and we're not getting interviews. And I feel like there's some sort of like mismatch. I know some people are accusing people of trying to like live off of their unemployment benefits or, the stimulus packages, whatever. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because it just feels really like a confusing time for a lot of people. And I know that it would be easy to get hired into a restaurant, but maybe more difficult to get hired into a remote desk job that's like the high valued, positions right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this topic. And I wish if I'd have thought about it, I would have pulled up, there's a reference. There's an amazing research report that just came out of Harvard or maybe in conjunction with Deloitte about what's really happening. But a couple things to know. One, there is not one job market. So the
Right.
media in particular is writing these summary, high level, whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
The job market in Phoenix is not the job market in Indianapolis, is not the job market in LA. So that's
Right.
one thing to know. The second thing to know is that back to that heuristic of if you're job seeking, if you're a professional looking for a job and you are not landing an exciting interview within 4 weeks, something's happening with you.
Okay.
So your skills are not in demand. You are not in a job market that's growing. So higher education, by the way, is going to go through a major contraction in the next X years. When you look
Ah.
at the demographics, the millennials are pretty done. Gen Z is not that big. And a lot of college graduates have learned that the debt will cripple them. And so they're
Mm-hmm.
telling people and their families, you don't really need to go to college. So,
Mm.
higher education, if you're an employee in higher education, that's a different kind of job search than if you're in tech, for example, right? So industry matters, geography matters, function matters. So you and I were just chatting about your prior work as a medical transcriptionist and how
Yeah.
technology changed that.
Yeah.
Well, you know what else isn't popular anymore? Being a blacksmith, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
technology changes things. And
Yep.
so that's a big deal. Another thing, and you reference this in restaurant work, but if you think about if you expand to hospitality, so hotels, travel, um, I don't know if you saw American Airlines is paying massive holiday bonuses to their people
Oh.
because speaking of a not working at home job, but well, that's not true actually. A lot of American Airlines employees do work at home,
Okay.
but yeah, like the salaries have not been reflective of what people are willing to work for. And if you think
Mhm.
about how many hundreds of thousands of people died in this country and what that means, like, even if the person who died wasn't working, that was a caregiver. Like, I forget the numbers, like more than 1 million children lost their primary caregiver to
My
death.
goodness.
Like, I know, I feel like crying too. Like, who's taking care of those children, right?
Yeah.
Even if they were in the workforce, like, or weren't in the workforce, like the
Yeah.
work of raising those children is there. That's not going away. And so that's one, I think, difference in the labor market. And then a lot of people retired. Both of my parents stopped working during COVID. My dad's a little older, and so he had planned it, but he had
Hmm.
also he'd been still working even though he was officially retired. And he stopped that. And
Hmm.
then my mom retired. Well, millions of baby boomers who had been kept working even though they were old enough to retire, like my dad,
Hmm.
or just decided, well, I'll just retire. Like those people aren't working. So the
Yeah.
workforce actually contracted. But like, are the people who are in the workforce or wanting to work, wanting to do that work? Right. So that's the other thing is like, even if you think of what you want to do versus in your local, if you do a quick Google map, I love this, by the way, if you're doing any kind of local, if you do a quick Google Maps in your local geography of big companies, Google Map search just to see like, oh, what's available.
You
Like,
search big companies.
no, just
Like, how
if
do
you
you just like start putting in Apple and Google and like
yeah, I mean, no, no,
Walmart
no.
or
Like, so what, let's say you're in the Scottsdale area or
uh-huh.
Tempe or whatever. So just, do your little like pull up your city and be like nearby businesses
Okay.
in Google or any maps, doesn't have to be Google Maps. And
Hmm.
then you could just see like what's there. And like if what's really near you is a lot of like restaurants, but you don't want to work in restaurants, right? So that might not be a good local match for you, which is why remote work is going to be great for you,
Yeah.
right? So then you might think about from a remote perspective, you might think about like, oh, let me go on the Facebook groups and see what remote companies are hiring, or um let me research like remote jobs that can be done well remotely with my
Yeah.
skills or whatever, right?
Well, even in Indeed, I just type in remote for the location and
Mm-hmm,
it'll bring up like if I type in keywords like, that match like my training or my background or experience or my desires,
mm-hmm.
they'll be like nationwide.
Yeah. And so what's happening is that for remote workers in particular, this is my opinion, this is not data backed. A lot more people want to work remotely
Oh yeah.
than there are remote positions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because of that competition, you really can't apply cold. That's the second time I've told you that.
Yeah.
and your listeners. Don't
Yeah.
apply cold. Um, but yeah, so that's one thing is where as a job seeker, you think, oh, I could do that. If you haven't done that precisely and you don't know somebody who can introduce you to somebody, you're not going to get that interview in within that 4-week period, right?
Hmm.
So then the next thing that happens, and this is not specific to remote work, is you think, well, I've been looking and I haven't landed anything, so I'll just expand what I'm willing to do, right? And then you look for, oh, you're nodding, you've been here.
My husband went through this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you follow that thread, pretty soon you're applying for jobs that you're really not qualified for.
Hmm.
And nobody who's looking at the application can draw that connection either, by the
Hmm.
way.
Or
And you
just
don't even,
locations that you might not want to even go to.
yeah. So then if you get an interview, it's not even a job you actually want.
Hmm.
And then, by the way, guess what happens when you show up for an interview for a job you don't actually want? You're
You
not
don't
the
have that
top
spark.
candidate.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. So I think that's another thing that's happening is that just the way people are trying to find jobs is really off, applying cold. And then the third thing is salary mismatch. So
Hmm.
maybe the businesses that are trying to hire are not offering schedule and benefits and pay that are
Yeah.
attractive enough for you to go work for them. And so then they're going to say like, oh, we can't find people. That's not actually true. There's people. They're just not offering anything people want.
So we could talk about the Great Resignation and, how that started and what it means. Basically, people not wanting to work in the jobs that, or they got the taste of working from home and wanted to keep that, or they realized that their priorities were different than they had been in the prior days before the pandemic. And I know for me, I have held back a little bit on pursuing a 40-hour a week career again because my kids weren't vaccinated. They are in the middle of it now. They've had dose 1 and we're working on, we got it scheduled already for dose 2. Yay. And I think that as soon as I know that my kids are fully vaccinated, I will feel free to, because I've always felt like I'm in limbo.
I don't
Like,
know.
what if
I don't know if people are ready for us to feel free, by the way. This is going to be a very fun winter.
I hope that these companies are going to realize that, the benefits package needs to include the ability to work remotely or the ability, the freedom to work flexible hours or, things like that. I think that in addition to salary, obviously keeping up with inflation, a lot of people are just discontented, I guess. Is that a word?
Yeah, they're discontent. I think discontent. Yeah, I mean, I have sort of two responses here. One is that um, if you're a top candidate, you can really negotiate for what you want. So not every job is advertised as remote, flexible, autonomous, whatever. But if you're great and can really communicate your skills, a lot more jobs are. And
Mm-hmm.
so, again, we have an article about how to negotiate with your boss on how to either stay remote or to move remote. So,
Yeah.
one encouragement is that if what you need to make your life work is remote, flexible, whatever, be open to other things that you could negotiate, not
Okay.
just looking for remote, whatever.
That's a really good
Um,
point.
yeah, if you think about how fast the world has changed, like I have, and I think this is one of your prep questions too. Like, I have fiber optic internet at home. Like
I wish
that
we're close,
changes.
but
Yeah, but
yeah.
like I can record a podcast with you from my living room with great audio quality. So the world changes, and the world certainly changed during COVID, but your ability to negotiate what you need, whether that's compensation, time off, flexibility, remote, flexible, training, opportunity, development, like all of it really comes back to your leverage of being a top candidate where your skills and education are a fit for what the employer needs.
So I just need to ask, does that come in not during the interview, but in the negotiation after they've offered you the job? Like, I don't want to scare people off before they offer me something.
Yeah. Yeah. So um, always do your research by having conversations to understand compensation ranges. So you're not going to be way out of range. If
Mhm.
you want double what a company has in their budgets, it's not going to work for anybody. So you do know that. There's again, we have so much content on our blog. Go educate yourself. But
I will look forward to reading it.
There's in our article about modern interview etiquette, we encourage people to, if you don't know the salary range at the end of your first interview, ask for the salary range so that you don't waste your time. So it's not like, oh, you can convince somebody to pay double. You can't, right? That's not realistic. But when you're a really strong fit, your values align, the team seems like they're going to, you're going to add to the culture on the team, your skills are what the company needs to grow or sustain or reduce risk or something important, you're creating value, right? And so when you can say, this is how I'm going to create value for you, your company, your team, then you generate leverage to negotiate what you need. How I'm going to be a great employee is, I'm going to work remotely or half the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You have mentioned a couple of times, don't apply cold. And so don't just like apply through Indeed. Don't just throw in you need a connection. Is that what you're getting at? Like you need to have networking and leverage that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, this is, and there's caveats, right? And I want to be careful of that. I know your audience is people who are working remotely, so probably more professionals, I would assume.
We've got both.
I don't know if you know.
We've got, as far as my guests, it's about half and half entrepreneurs or people who are starting their own small business versus employees and freelancers.
Yeah. Oh, great. So entrepreneurs and freelancers know that relationships are how you create business. Mm-hmm. People hire people they trust, and people trust people they like, and people like people they know. This is not rocket science. If you've ever hired a babysitter or gone to find a doctor, or, if you think of any of the ways, or if you've even if you're religious, if you try a church, companies don't hire people, people hire people, right? So so that's one thing to know about relationships and why they matter, whether you're an entrepreneur selling something or an employee looking for your next great thing. The other thing is that you're not going to know important information about why you'll thrive in a role if you don't talk to people. So to use an analogy, back to the travel analogy, pretty sure that if you want to be a reservation agent for an airline, that's available to you right now, right? There's a lot of openings.
The customer service roles.
Yeah. I mean, who do you call when the flight gets canceled? Somebody's on the other end of that line, and I bet they're working at home, right? So if you just glamorize what that work is like, you're not going to know much about the schedule, the demands, the stress, the money, the opportunity, the culture. So you really need to talk to people who are doing that work to understand why you're going to thrive. And I always bring up the isms. So racism, this is a white supremacist world. If you are not a white person, it's hard and awful. And I hope that everyone on that, you and I and everyone listening, we should be actively working to dismantle the white supremacy that has been so toxic and terrible. And also, you got to avoid it. Don't work for a culture that's terrible, right? How do you figure out what the culture is? Not by Googling. You have to talk to people. Ageism. If you walk around pre-COVID at an average corporation, not a lot of people over 50. What happened to those people, right? They're still working. I talk to them all the time. They get forced out. So if a company is ageist, you should know that, right? If you're...
I've seen it happen. I've known people that literally months before retirement were let go. And
yeah. So how do you find a place where and sexism? I mean, side note, if you're a woman and there's no women in the leadership team or on the board of directors,
right?
Really? Right? So, and Yeah. So, but understanding how a culture is, and that's just identity stuff, right? If you're an introvert and don't really want to talk to people, don't end up in a company where they expect you to on Zoom video all the time, right?
Hmm.
Like, if you want to learn and grow, don't go work for a company that wants you to do the same job all day, every day for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So, there's so many reasons to talk to people. And as you talk to people, you're going to figure out why you're going to be awesome and thrive and why the company really needs you. So that's why you have to talk to people, not just to build the relationships.
Can you talk about gaps? I know you were talking about having current, relevant, work history is what gets you hired in your next job. So, what about the people that have a gap that did take off some time to be a caregiver of some sort, or for whatever reason, illness?
Oh, I love this question. So I think there's sort of two separate categories here. So I want to talk about it a little separately. The first category is the one that people who are really feeling stuck and really feeling discouraged right now is people who are recently coming out of a gap, right? Especially with COVID, a lot of parents of young children or caregivers of elderly parents took time off. Maybe your partner died. Like it's been really, really tough out here, right? And so now you're like, okay, I'm going to get it together. I'm going to go to work. So, what's really important is spending the time on your story to make it future focused, not looking backward.
Okay.
Future focused. Here's my skills. Here's what I learned during this time. Here's what I'm bringing to you as an employer. And I have a template if anyone wants to send me a note. Hello at Arvida, ARCVIDA.com or Elissa at Arvida, ELISSA at Arvida.com. I have a template called What's Your Story? Do you remember the old Mad Libs?
Yeah.
It's that. It's a Mad
Awesome.
Libs. You can write your story because, and then you can, once you have it, of course, you can share it. Don't read your story, but
Hmm.
that's a place where you shift your story from this terrible thing happened. I was laid off. I was fired. My dad died. My kid, I had to stay home with my child, like all of the reasons that people have been really disconnected from work. The narrative is this terrible thing happened to me, but now I'm going to work. No, the narrative you need is here's what I did, here's what I learned, here's what I'm excited to do for you. So if you, or I don't know if you need it, but if any of your listeners need it, send me a note. Happy to share that template. So that's the first case, is really where you're just trying to get back into it. Is you need a new story, you need a new way to communicate. The second case is in the past you had a gap, right? And so the problem with a gap is not that you had a gap. The problem with a gap is it begs the question of, are you really going to work? Like, are you going to stay here? If I hire and train you, are you going to stay here as an employee?
Because there's a lot of risk for someone. There's a lot of loss to a company if they train you and invest in you and then you bail.
Right. And so a couple different things there. One, you need to find a place that's really a good fit for your life.
Hmm.
So our clients do a lot of work around what we call designing your life. It's not about your job, right? It's about your life, right?
Hmm.
How many hours you were saying, you were talking about being a 0.78 employee, right? How many hours do you want to work? Do you want to travel? Do you not want to travel? Do you want to bring your dog to work? You only want to work at home? Like, do you really need to work for a company whose mission aligns with yours? Like all of the things, right? This is your life. And what do you need from your job? Do you really need benefits? Do you really need opportunity to grow? Do you really need socialization? Which, by the way, no shade, right? Everybody needs something different.
Yeah.
So that's what it's really about. And you've got to align that with the opportunity so that when an interviewer says, like, oh, what about this gap? Which now I'm going to stand on my mentoring stool for a second. The question is not what about the gap? The question is, are you going to be a committed employee if I hire you?
Okay.
Right? So when someone says, what about the gap? You say, well, COVID was tough. Here's why I was out of work. Here's why I'm really excited to join this company. And I'm looking at this as a long term opportunity for me to contribute skills, grow that as in the role of function, industry, whatever, and develop so that I can be a great long-term employee, which don't say that. Don't say great long-term employee. But
But
you
again,
answer the
it's
question of why.
what I can do for you rather than, yeah. Um, I wanted to, I don't know if you wanted to wrap up anything on that one, but I did want to talk a little bit about your work from home experience and like how you're managing your team, I'm assuming, from home.
Yeah, absolutely. We have an amazing team. I have to say, one of the things that's so amazing about Arvida is that our mission is creating a world where every professional is happily engaged in work they find fulfilling. That's such a compelling mission. And so the people like the technical marketing, those kinds of people on our team really like working for the mission. And our mentors and coaches, which if you look at our site, you can see we hire, train, and pay happy working professionals with really impressive careers who are already certified coaches or mentors. So they are all working full-time other places, and they do this because they're so excited about helping professionals really
Oh,
get
wow.
there. Yeah. So the mission is really compelling, right? So that's super fun in terms of like why people want to work with me or with Arvida, not just me, right? It's a team. But the tools, um, I mean, Arvida is hosted in the cloud. So we're hosted by Azure. Very excited. We just got accepted to the Microsoft First Startup Founders Program, which is so exciting. Um, And but everything is in the cloud, meaning nothing. So everything we do, our application is in the cloud, our community is accessible through any web browser or application. And then our team works in the cloud. So we have customer relationship management. We love HubSpot. There's lots of good options, but we love HubSpot. For any of our software, we're using Visual Studio, and GitHub is where our software is stored. We're using project management. I've tried a bunch of different project management, and we use Trello. I don't know, are you
Mm-hmm.
familiar with
Oh,
Trello?
yeah.
So and there's so many different aspects of how you work that matter. Our team has a lot of people who are doing different projects. So Trello is really flexible for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we use like file storage. We really like Dropbox because it has the security we need and also amazing customer support.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of any other really key tools. Of course, like functional tools like, accounting on Zero or design on Canva, or, we have a lot of those kinds of functional tools.
How do you communicate?
Oh, yeah, I like that question. So we do a couple things. So on projects, we like Trello,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a checklist. So Trello, any project management tool has this, right? There's a checklist, there's a deadline, there's people on the team, and then you can put a file, share a note, do a quick check-in. So any kind of projects, we like that. For updates, we generally use our community. So we have a community that's hosted by, it's not our tech, our application is our tech, but our community is hosted by Mighty Networks. Really love Mighty Networks, female founder as well. And really great functionality if anyone's looking for
I
a
don't know that
place.
one. Like,
I,
what would it be similar to?
well, at first it was kind of like Facebook without any of that, but now it's really robust. Yeah, happy to, I mean, you can, I'm sure, just look them up and cruise around, but
Yeah.
really like Mighty Networks, also very affordable. So nice ad there. But yeah, so our different groups, so like our coaches have different work they're doing. Our mentors and cohort leaders have, we need to give them tools or support, that sort of thing. So we're putting that out in the community. For scheduling purposes, we're using a fair amount of the CRM because in the customer relationship management, we can just tag people. So our senior coach is Colleen. We had a new client who's going to work with her. So I just was like, hey, Colleen, here's the notes from this conversation. And then she can just go check it. So it's all very asynchronous, right? You
Mm-hmm.
just kind of do it. And it's pretty organized. So it's not like divorced from the project or the client or whatever. We do have not a lot of meetings, but I use Calendly. Do you know Calendly?
Mm-hmm.
So I really like Calendly for those of you who are working with just remote teams like ours or lots of clients. It's amazing because it keeps me very organized. And side note for balancing my life, it integrates with my personal calendar as well as my work calendar. So I don't have
Nice.
to do both. Yeah.
Yeah. I use
So
Acuity scheduling, but I think they're similar in some ways.
yeah, we looked at Acuity several years ago, and I think it was probably a little bit newer then, so it didn't have what we needed. But yeah, so that those are the tools, and so my team can just book time with me if they need it.
Good.
But that keeps us out of email, and it keeps us. Those are the ways we stay asynchronous because a lot of what really is difficult if you're working remotely in across time zones, which we are, is if you're not if everything has to be like on Slack even or um, in a meeting, you lose a lot of the flexibility.
Yeah. So you mentioned time zones. How many time zones are we talking?
So right now our clients and our team are only domestic. So in the US. So
Mhm.
in the future, I'm sure, as I mentioned, we're definitely going to go global in the future. But right now I don't know, what are we at now with daylight savings? Does that make us 3 or 4 time zone? Is
I
Arizona
think
Mountain Time now?
it smushes it back into 3 now. Yeah,
Yeah.
we are, is that right? No, we are 4. There's
I think 3 because you're in Mountain Time now, right?
I am, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific is still 4, but Mountain, yeah, because for a while I was
oh
the
yeah,
same
so
as you.
4. Yeah.
I'm confused right now.
4. You're right. No, 4. So yeah, 4 time zones.
Okay. You have some really great tips and I guess maybe more perspective about things like meal planning or cooking or meal services. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and how it's helped you with working from home?
Yeah, for sure.
Or I suppose maybe just working in general. Like when did you do those when you
Working.
were working on site too?
Um, yes and no. I mean, some of what's changed over the years is that these options have gotten better. So if you
Yeah.
think about grocery delivery and dry
Mhm.
cleaner delivery and that sort of thing, which I'm a big, it kind of broke a little bit with COVID. It's coming back now. But yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of I'm the only person who can nurture my family and lead my business. I can lead my business with help. There's lots of amazing leaders in my business. And shout out again to, senior coach and tech people. And like we just have such amazing people. Like this is not an Elissa show, which I want to just call that out. But yeah, people in my family eat like 3 times a day and snacks.
Yeah.
There's a lot of food. And so, particularly during the pandemic when everybody was home, like staring at each other, like, um, what we've tried a bunch of ready to eat meals and sort of minimal preparation. And where we've landed is we do grocery shopping, usually delivery from a local market once a week. And then I use Sunbasket because I really like to eat, and that's a problem with making sure my clothes fit. So Sunbasket has really healthy options. We do paleo for we're not paleo, but we do paleo for the meal planning, and they just send you the recipe and the ingredients. So I really like that.
So you want to physically cook your food.
I do, it's funny. I thought that I wanted the free time, and it does. It frees up, an hour a day not to physically cook. But I actually realized by not having to cook for like 2 or 3 months, I didn't cook because we were trying all of these prepared meals. I missed it. I
Mhm.
like the ritual. I have a really lovely, not huge, but a lovely kitchen. And I turn on my Spotify playlist and I light a candle because it's dark. And I put on my apron and I just like it. And the food is better
Mhm.
it's healthier and better. So yeah, I did learn that I actually don't mind cooking, but if you mind cooking, there's such good options. There's
My
such good
husband
options.
enjoys the cooking, and so I just benefit from that. But there
Perfect.
was I have a friend who just had a baby, and so with the baby, she did sign up for, I can't remember the name of it, but they were gluten friendly, like gluten free meals, and quite healthy as well. And she gave me a promo code, so for like a small amount of money, I was able to get 6 meals for just a few dollars more as a trial, and they tasted fine. But I really didn't like the idea of peeling off plastic, sticking a plastic thing into my microwave and microwaving my food and just kind of like, ugh. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
tasted good, and in a pinch, if I was in a really, really busy season of my life, I would definitely eat that and enjoy it. I'd plop it onto a real plate probably. But yeah, I can see like there's pros and cons. And for someone like my husband who thoroughly enjoys the cooking process, have at it.
Well, and I love that you bring up giving to other people, because one of the things that as you know working people that suffers is really contributing to your family and your community. And so I would like to share one of my favorite COVID hacks, which was when and unfortunately a lot of people I knew got COVID, everyone, right? Not everyone I knew, but when people were sick, I could do grocery delivery from my
Yeah,
computer through Instacart.
we did it.
And,
Hmm.
so then, people don't need flowers, they need soup, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
just like, hey, here's a delivery. And I did that, I want to say 4 or 5 times for people.
yeah.
I did that when my brother had surgery across the country. I could just like deliver
Hmm.
groceries. And so definitely thinking about like, what are the things that are taking your energy that you can outsource? So in my
Hmm.
case, like cooking soup and delivering it to a friend. Like I
Yeah.
just didn't have the time, but I could deliver the soup without that. There's also, if you're familiar with Shop Box Fox, I don't know if you
I
know
don't know
them.
this one either. No.
So there's lots of services like this, and I think Etsy does boxes too. But this is a local company that's getting bigger. They're again female founders. They do really nice gift boxes of various sizes, and I love it because they have a handwritten note. So like we did one for my mother-in-law's birthday, that sort of thing where um, it doesn't take that long from a time perspective. So I'm not having to bifurcate my attention from work, nurturing my family, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's a service, that kind of service that really makes the family or sort of like the community step there. And I will say too, I do volunteer for my church. I'm working as a finance consultant, which I love. And then I also am excited. I'm getting to run the book fair for the elementary school next year.
I did that a couple times. It's really fun. Books are wonderful. How old is your daughter?
She's in 5th grade,
Okay,
so
I have a
11.
fifth
Yeah.
grade daughter too.
Oh,
Almost
fun.
11.
Yeah, one other
Uh,
hack. I don't know how you exercise. It was sort of fortunate timing, but we got a Peloton right before the pandemic. And so that's one thing I do every day is some kind of exercise.
do you know if they ended up getting backlogged during the pandemic? Like I can't remember if they were affected by the shipping crisis.
I don't know. I mean, probably, right?
I
Like
don't
it
I don't
seems like
have
it.
one, but I saw one delivered and it's like a Peloton truck comes and drives and wheels it right into your house. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, and I would say the app you should, I'm sure they have, and I'm like advertising Peloton. This is what good
Hmm.
businesses do, by the way. A lot of our Arvida's business comes from people who've used us because they're like, oh, this works. You should try it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, the in addition to the bicycle, I actually like the app, which you can just download. I think they even have a free trial period. And
Hmm.
I do actually weight classes. I don't know if you have any free weights at home. But they
It's
tend to be.
funny. I ordered some and the little rack that
Yeah,
is supposed
yeah.
to hold them came and the weights never showed up.
Oh my gosh. Well,
But
that's
I
a good
never
thing.
noticed. I never noticed until it was way too late.
Well, that's actually free weights are very easy to find on Nextdoor or Craigslist or anything
Right.
too. So yeah, so the app is really good. They do meditations or walkings or yoga or body weight that you don't even need any equipment for. And there's tons of, I mean, people who get into this probably have lots more strategies of on demand workouts, 20 or 30 minutes a day. Like we all know we need it. Just do
Hmm. Yeah.
it.
Today, I was driving my kids to school. We are outside of the boundaries for our bus. And so on my way home, I was like, you know what? I have one of those street striders. This like a elliptical machine that you ride like a bike, standing up, moving your arms and legs. It's
Mhm.
pretty weird. Um, and I was like, I need to remember how far it is. This one route that I have done, this one loop that I make in this neighborhood, and then another loop. What if I were to do them together? How far would that be? And so I took my car and I drove around, because that's just easier for me than like actually like drawing my finger on a map, probably. But
Right.
um, Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because our weather now here in Arizona is very beautiful. And it's time for me to give out. We got a treadmill from our local Buy Nothing group. A friend in the Buy Nothing project knew that I was looking for a free treadmill if possible, and I waited. And she's like, I contacted the guy. He has a free one on Facebook Marketplace, and I told him I have a friend who's going to come and get it tonight. Can you come get it? And I could, thank God. We loaded up in the van and we went and got it. So I've
Yeah.
been taking a shelf and setting it across the arms, and I can put my laptop on and I can walk slowly. My husband gets on and he's like hoofing it, he's like trying to like, on his lunch break, just like go like listen to a podcast and walk as fast as he can. But we went for a walk yesterday and that was really nice. Just the two of us outside during the daytime with the kids all gone, like just stroll through the neighborhood, and we were walking pretty quick. Um, so I think we're kind of walkers. We're not like really high impact exercise people, but
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so, especially if the weather's nice, which I know in a lot of the country it's getting cold enough. My
mm-hmm.
family in the Midwest does mall walks sometimes. One of
Yeah.
my favorite tricks as a remote worker, because as you probably can tell, I'm pretty social, is actually to walk and talk. So either
Yeah.
with family or friends, and I love to do this with business networking, like mostly with people I already know, but sometimes people I don't know. Hey, why don't you and I both walk? So
Yeah.
you're in Arizona, I'm in LA, let's walk and talk. And, even if you're just strolling around for 2 miles,
Mm-hmm.
you get that movement and it feels like a nice break. I don't know about you, but there are days when I do not open the front door just because I'm working at home,
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing housework, whatever. So
It's nice to get out and see the green grass or the leaves changing or even the snow. I think just for I don't know how it affects my brain, but something about seeing nature is really healing.
oh
And there
yeah,
are
and you and I
times
could
that I
just
don't
talk
open the
about
door.
that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
there, yeah.
Hey, I meant to ask you if you have a local office or if you just work 100% from your home.
It's so funny. We didn't start out thinking we would be remote. So we do have a place we can work together, but we don't.
Yeah. Are
And
you
then
paying for this place?
it's kind of a long story. The answer is not really. So we pay for it, but it's not primary business use. There's another reason we have it. And
Okay.
it's also, we need, everyone knows who's an entrepreneur, you need a physical address. And this is a good one because it's in a secure building. So,
Good.
I don't have to
Got it.
worry about random people sort of visiting.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, we started out thinking we would have an office. And then what happened is that our model of impressive people, professionals who are coaches and mentors, like actually don't care where you live, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we built Arvida for access. Like we designed Arvida for people who might not be able to leave the house, maybe don't have transportation, need to do this work in the middle of the night. Like we built this for access.
Yeah.
So if you can access it anywhere, why do people have to be in one place? Right. So
Right.
it was a little accidental, but no, our team is remote. Even some of the people who live in the LA area that work with us, I've never met, which I'm hoping
Wow.
to change after
Yeah.
COVID. But yeah, I mean, it's 2021, here we are.
How did you get the name Arvida?
Oh, that's a cool question. Um, so we were thinking, we started thinking about like, oh, career, this and that, but it's really not about your career. It's really about your life. Work is a really wonderful part of your life.
Right.
And so we're also thinking about being a global company and being inclusive. If you remember the old Ricky Martin song, Living La Vida Loca, like that people learned the word Vita around the world because of that song. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a Spanish word, right? And so it's about your life. And arc
Mm-hmm.
is a really fascinating word. If you think about an energy, it's the same in several languages. It's the strongest part of an architecture. Like if you think of an arch or arc,
Mm-hmm.
it's the strongest part. And we think of careers as an arc. So
Yeah.
maybe you're at the beginning or the middle or high or kind of winding down, but you still want to work. And then it's also an interesting tie-in with energy. So if you think of an arc of electricity,
Yeah.
so we liked the global nature, we like the strength, we like the visual arc, as
Mm-hmm.
well as that it's really about your life. We love our logo. We didn't like our first iteration, but
we'll link to your
perfect.
website. People can
Okay,
look
cool.
it up. Well, I usually ask that question that I told you about before about, what advice would you give people who are thinking about working remotely or from home or being an entrepreneur or branching off for the first time? I don't know if we've already covered all of that, but what do you want to talk about to wrap things up?
For people who are just starting, who are really considering it, I think about how you create value, like, and where that makes you really happy. So if you think about work or activity, not consumption, so not watching TV or whatever, but if you think about the activity that gets you in flow, like, is that writing? Is that research? Is it cooking or crafting? Or like, what is it that you're doing that you're just like, I would do this without, when I have free time, this is what I do.
For me, it'd be talking to people.
Well, that's what you should do then, right? Like, so that is then the next step is this is what I like to do. And then pull the string. How do you create value with that, right?
Yeah.
If talking to people is what you want to do, where are the places that somebody needs to be on the other side of that conversation? I think podcast host, right? But a lot of other places too.
Yeah.
And then you want to equate that to your experience, your skills, and your not just your skills, but your education if you can. And really think about where the high need is. So we talked about, and not to keep talking about travel, but we talked about this incredible need in airline right now. Like, if you like to talk to people and you like traveling, an airline might be a great place to explore, right? So this idea of really thinking about industry along with what makes you happy, what you like to do, and what creates value with that activity. And you can play with that in a lot of different ways.
I suppose that not everyone you serve is looking to work remotely. I'm assuming you help people looking in any kind of career.
Yeah, so we're personalized. So sometimes people are like, well, what age or what education? Well, we do only work with people who've earned at least a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter. It's just, who are you? Right? So yeah, we've helped we've helped a surgeon, we've helped, attorneys, we've helped people who didn't want to be teachers anymore, people who didn't want to work in sales.
Yeah.
People who had been in, all kinds of different, because it's just about you. It's not about it, again, back to what we were talking about with recruiting. Like, if you're working with somebody who works for a company, it's not about you, it's about the company, right? So when you work with a service like ours, it's about you.
And you've talked about you help people who have bachelor's degrees who want to re-enter or upskill or change. Do you want to talk a little bit about who you serve?
Yeah, so our client is an ambitious US professional who's actively looking for their next great thing.
Okay.
So at least a bachelor's degree or higher. Probably half of our clients have, master's or JD or PhD. Just because if you think about, demographically, like half of millennials do. Like, it's just sort of like, and then people who are pivoting. So if you think about mid-career, what you used to do worked for you and now it doesn't work for you. So sometimes that's because of you're going back to work. Sometimes that's because you've had a second baby is actually a big impetus. Like, okay, not this. You've earned a master's degree or PhD and you want to use it, but whatever happened, you didn't use it. And now you're like, wow, I did all this work. I want to use it. That's a big impetus for our clients. But definitely people, for on the junior side, people who started their career 2 years into it and they're just like, I hate this. Like, I don't know what to do, but it's not this. So we have a program for people of any age that's called Bridge Builder, which is, I think I'm going to graduate school. So let me explore before I do that. I need to work. So yeah. And then with people more experienced, you think about 20 or 25 years. So you said you had 23 years, like, you're not done working. You want a job.
I still have like another 25 years
left. Yeah. So you want a job that's fulfilling and engaging and gives you income and allows you to nurture your family and, aligns with your values. And like, could you find that randomly? Like, maybe. maybe not, right? And so
Not these
that's,
days, not the same way as you could have 20 years ago.
yeah. Well, and that's a good point too, is that 20 years ago, we were much more bound to a location. Now you
Yeah,
can work
true.
anywhere in the world. And by the way, you're competing with everyone in the world too.
Exactly.
So it's a very different thing. I have to say, one of the funniest things is that when random people, well, when somebody talks to me about what we offer, they think that the junior professionals are the ones who are most excited. But I have to say that our fastest sales are actually people who are more experienced because you already know what a great job means in your life. Like,
Yeah.
and you know the world has changed and that it's harder. So
How, one more time, can people find you? I know you mentioned a few addresses earlier, but go ahead and reiterate those.
no, thank you. It's arcvida.com, ARCVIDA.com. We're on LinkedIn if you want to check out who's on our team and what we're doing. And then if you just want to send me a note, absolutely happy to chat. Our first step is always a free conversation anyway. So
Okay,
not a hard sell here. And
good. Okay.
it's Elissa at arcvida.com, ELISSA at arcvida is ARCVIDA.com.
Well, this has been very fun and insightful. I appreciate the time that we did go on the long end, which for me is perfectly great. I hope our listeners can. We're on a very long walk today, or
Maybe
maybe
they
saw this in
sped us
two
up.
parts.
Yeah.
Yes, I do that. So, well, thank you so much, Alyssa. Any final thoughts before we head out?
No, I just want to encourage everyone, if you are stuck in your career, if you're not happily working in a job you find fulfilling and engaging, don't stay stuck. 10, 12, 16 weeks, you could be in a place where you're much happier. So just know that you have options.
Thank you. All right, this has been Alyssa Unton with Abram Malone, and yes, I work from home, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Alyssa.